he says, how long have you been off of Ataburn, I think it was. To me, Ataburn was what you took for malaria, pills to keep from getting malaria. That's what they gave the soldiers out in the South Pacific.
Right.
I said, I didn't take any Ataburn. Oh, yes he did. He says, I can see it in your face and your eyes. I said, I don't take Ataburn. Well, he says, you must have. They must have told you it was something else. I said, I've never had any Ataburn. I just want to get well. So, well, he said, I don't know what's wrong with you, so, but I'll send you down to the hospital anyhow. So when I walked in the hospital, there was a nurse at the receiving station. She kind of threw up her arms and says, oh, here's another jaundice case coming in. So, I mean, she knew what it was. This kid had never seen anybody coming back from the ETO, you know.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I stayed there for, several months.
Okay.
In the time I was there,
Now your parents knew that you were back though, right?
well, my dad is dead, but my mother knew by then.
Okay.
She got a letter, telegram. It said, and I still have the telegram, it says, this is to advise you. I think it says that your son, Tech Sergeant Thomas Edward McElherne, returned to military control on May 8th. And that General so-and-so wanted me to advise you of this. Something like that.
Sweet. Sweet.
That was a telegram.
Well, did she get a telegraph on when you were MIA? By chance, when y'all ditched into France, did they send her?
Yes, they did, but she didn't get it. She was staying with her mother, my grandmother, in Chicago at that time.
Okay.
And apparently Western Union didn't know what to do with it, and they gave it to the priest.
Okay.
And the priest notified her, so.
Okay.
And whatever happened to the telegram, I have no idea, so.
But she did get that shock once. Did she also get notice that you were actually a POW?
No,
Do you know
I was a missing person until that.
So you showed up on the
Yes. The
that-
Germans
at that
had
German
their,
place. Okay.
whatever kind of system they had for clearing that, well, that was all
Yeah, it
gone.
probably broke down by the time you got, shuttled around. That system would probably broke down. They probably got tired of, or the system broke down where we can't even report what we've got.
I'm telling you, the whole German government was broken down.
It was a mess.
They had trucks that they couldn't get fuel for.
Yeah.
The Air Corps had bombed all of their refineries, and I'm told that they finally discovered that they had refineries that were making fuel out of something else. I don't know whether it was grain or what, but it wasn't crude oil from the ground.
Right.
And we found out they were getting stuff from those places, and we bombed those and shut them down too. So they didn't have enough fuel to drive their trucks or their cars. Anything that moved had horses pulling them. I'm talking about ground troops that I saw as a prisoner of war going to the prison camp. I found out that my navigator was at the same prison camp I was, and I never saw him there.
Okay.
Apparently they had separated him as an officer, and that by the time the colonel that I'm talking about showed up, well, they couldn't do that anymore. They were just so full of people, prisoners coming in, that they didn't know what to do with them.
Okay.
Anyhow,
All right. So when
to end up this whole thing, well, Stayed in that hospital for several months. It took a while to get over jaundice because you don't just take a pill and walk home. You're on a special low-fat or no-fat diet. There's no alcohol. That's where I was for several months. Then I went home and I had, I think I went home and came back. He gave me a week off at home. Then I came back to the hospital and he kept me for a week and then sent me back home or on, they call it a POW time off.
Okay.
60 days, 2 months. So I was home when VJ Day happened, and I was home when the war was over, and I went back to San Antonio, or went down to San Antonio, which I was told to do at the end of that 60 days, and when I got down there, I found out that I was eligible for discharge, and I took the discharge. I could have been reassigned to most anything that was fitting my rank that I would ask to go to.
Okay.
I had thought about flying with my co-pilot as an engineer for him
Fine engineer.
if he
for him.
stayed in the service, and I just forgot about that. I was going to go home, so that's what I did.
So that's
I
in
had-
November of 45, right?
Yes, and I
Okay.
had one experience I got to tell you about.
Okay.
When I was leaving San Antonio, I was waiting for the train to go up north. It was the Katy. That was the name of the railroad. And the train was called the Blue Bonnet Special. And it left about 5 o'clock or so.
Okay.
So I was downtown wandering around in San Antonio. I checked in a place or two and had a beer, you know. And a couple of MPs stopped me. They were in a Jeep. They stopped the Jeep and they wanted to know who I was and where my papers were. And
Because you're still wearing uniform, right?
oh yes,
Yeah.
uh-huh. And I was a tech sergeant too,
Right.
so they knew that. And so I told them I was kind of killing some time waiting for the train to leave at 5 o'clock or so. What are you concerned about? They said that this place where you're at here is kind of off limits. People like you come down here and get their throats cut. So you don't want to be here. I said, no, I don't want to be here. I guess I better get back to the train station. They said that was a good idea. And these guys, I'm telling you, they picked me up, the two of them, and put me in the back of the Jeep, jumped in the Jeep, and raced to the train station and dumped me off there.
Yeah.
They didn't say, get in the Jeep.
They did it for you.
Yeah.
Well, they probably didn't like hanging around there either.
Well, I never thought about that
Yeah.
because they had guns, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some, it's kind of like in that movie Casablanca where the Germans say we could be in New York and Rick, Rick says, well, I wouldn't advise you to go into Brooklyn.
Well, in telling
Yeah,
you that
there's-
story,
Yeah.
that's the last time anybody in the Army ever took care of me
Okay.
in the usual sense.
Right. Okay.
And I thought about that many times since then.
Because they sound like, because I'm from San Antonio, and there were some spots that were really, really bad. And for thinking about where you were, where they were talking about, for you to walk to the train station was probably not even safe to do that. That's where they kind of get people, they'll roll people on the way to the train station. So that was good that they just flat put you in that Jeep and got you over there quick.
Well, anyhow, that's
Right.
kind of the end of my
There's
story.
your story.
And
There's a little bit more that I know.
what?
When you got back to Iowa State University, he was living with his mom and his room was in the basement and he couldn't go down there and study. And he realized later it might have been PTSD, but they didn't talk about it.
Oh yeah, well
And he
I
had
was a soldier then, so.
Yeah, but it was after. But it was the effect of the war. And he said at Iowa State University, he was in engineering, and one of his professors, he said, really made sure he got through. He had a long career as an engineer with the Iowa DOT. But that was kind of rough, wasn't it, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember one time, after that time I was in Des Moines. I think it was while I was still on my POW leave, and an MP stopped me because I wasn't wearing a necktie. He wanted to see my papers, and I showed him my papers. So he knew I was a former prisoner of war, and he knew I was a tech sergeant, and he was a private, and he was telling me what he wanted me to do. He says, we would like to have you wear a necktie when you're downtown here in Des Moines. We try to set a good example for the youngsters that were just coming into the service, and we want them to see that the people that were our senior people in the service are properly dressed. And here in Des Moines, that means a necktie. So I said, I'll give that a try, or something like that.
Well, because they're in uniform still, right?
Well, they were a military place, because we had,
Right.
there was a army camp in Des Moines. Well, there was a whack. They trained whacks there. If you wonder where they ever trained whacks in the army, well, that's was where they got their training. Fort Des Moines, yeah.
So you end up being an engineer
Yeah.
for how many years?
Well, I graduated in '48 and went to work there. I went to work in Sioux City and then in Fairfield, both in Iowa, and then back in Ames, so
Okay.
where their main headquarters is. So from 1948 until 1968 when I retired, so that's
20 years?
a little more than that, I
A little
guess.
over 20. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know what else I can tell you about my military life. There was one thing that was kind of interesting, and that is that my radio, when I was still in Nettishaw, my radio operator and I were having lunch, maybe breakfast, and this officer comes in and he said he's looking for an engineer and a radio operator to make up a minimum crew to fly over to France and pick up an airplane. So I don't know if we could do that. And we said we could, so he took us over there, and we went down to another airfield where they had a lot of air transport command. These are guys going from one field to another doing something or other.
Right.
And a lot of that kind of traffic. So we flew over to France in a B-24 and picked up this airplane. Apparently it had run out low on fuel or something like that,
Okay.
you know. And we flew it back to Nettishaw. The next day, well, I told you earlier in my story that he wanted